Well, a warm welcome to this talk. Now, in this video, we'll be giving evidence that German intelligence knew in 2020 that it was very likely that the SARS coronavirus 2 originated from the Wuhan Institute of Virology as a lab leak. Now, this is superficially reported in mainstream press, and we're going to look at the BBC and Reuters, which covers it in fairly basic terms. But then we'll be looking at NZZ, which is a Swiss German language news agency, which is covered in much more detail, and we'll also be giving the references from the original German newspapers in which this was released, who did the actual primary investigative journalism. Good to see that investigative journalism is alive and well in Germany. Not so sure about the United Kingdom, not so sure about Canada, not so sure about Australia, not so sure about New Zealand, not so sure about the United States. And the other question is, if German intelligence knew, then surely other intelligence agencies knew. Fill in the gap there. And also the NZZ agency, the Swiss German language agency, goes on to talk about the fact, or their report, that MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, was being experimented on at the same time with a much, much higher fatality rate. And it also talks about the manipulation and compromise of previously prestigious medical journals. So superficially reported on in Reuters and the BBC. Some pretty interesting additional facts brought up by the German language sources. Now, these are the basic reports from the BBC and Reuters, but they are covering it. German Foreign Intelligence Services, 80 to 90% chance that coronavirus accidentally leaked from a Chinese lab. So 80 to 90%, and they are saying that the leak was accidental, which I do agree with. The intelligence services, the German intelligence, BND, in 2020, bear in mind, this is way back at the start. Now, of course, the other thing here is that this report was commissioned by Angela Merkel's government, and the report must have been received, and they said diddly squat, nothing. This has only just come out in the past week, past few days really, but by these investigative journalists. Let me just show you the primary sources here so you know we're not making this up. This is one of the primary sources here. And this is the other newspaper here, which have been translated into English by Google Translate or whatever it is. So that's where this has come from, these investigative journalists, which is great to, where is the investigative journalism? All the stories that have been going on, and so many news agencies in our countries have just gone along with the narrative. I mean, it really is quite disappointing in my view. Anyway, let's get back to what we know here. They're saying Wuhan Institute of Virology have been carrying out experiments where viruses are modified to become more transmissible to humans. And that's what the BBC said. Reuters at least had the gumption to say gain of function research. So this is clearly gain of function research that had been going on. Now, they're the German sources there. World Health Organization 2021. Lab leak theory extremely unlikely, right? Marks out of 10 for the WHO. You fill in the gap. BND, German intelligence, met in Berlin in 2020. Project Saaremaa, looking at viral origins. Good for them. Did our other intelligence agencies meet at the same time? We're not told, but it would be hard to imagine that there wasn't a little bit of academic curiosity amongst these agencies. A team of expert and researchers are put together. So leading researchers, experts were put together, concluded the lab leak theory was likely, found indications that several violations of safety regulations had occurred at the lab. So yes, that's certainly the case. Leaky sieves do come to mind. The assessment was committed by Angela Merkel, but she kept stum and said nothing. Nor did the other guy, well, I've forgotten what his name is now, but the other guy in Germany that's just left, he kept quiet about it as well. And neither of them have commented. Findings were shared with the CIA in the autumn of 2024. So can this be right that German intelligence waited to 2024 to share the intelligence with the CIA? As far as we know, seems incredible, but there you go. Right. China's foreign ministry spokesman said, "We believe that tracing the origin of COVID-19 is a scientific issue." And they said some other stuff. Of course, it's a scientific issue, but we can't work it out if we don't get the data from you. I mean, I remember in my science, first part of my science degree, I had to work out the distance to the moon. It's a fairly standard thing to do. But you had to collect information. Now, if I said to you, work out the distance to the moon given no information at all, then you couldn't do it. You need information to work on, and if that information's hidden, what can we do? The conclusion that a laboratory leak is extremely unlikely was reached by the China WHO expert team. So the China World Health Organization expert team concluded that a lab leak was extremely unlikely. Combination of the WHO and China. Of course, the US government's just left the WHO. Largely due to, partly due to disappointment about this. It's hardly worth going through all these. The authoritative scientific conclusion has been widely recognised by the international community. Has it really? I'm not sure about that. China firmly opposes any form of political manipulation on the issue of COVID-19 origin tracing, which of course we agree with completely. The Institute never carried out any gain-of-function research on coronaviruses, according to the Chinese authorities. So they say they never carried out any gain-of-function research. Right, now this is the German outlet here. So NZZ, Swiss news agency. Again, I've clicked the click the translate button here. So this is where some of this comes from, and a very good investigation it seems to be. Perhaps NZZ will consider opening a branch in England or Scotland or Northern Ireland or Wales. Might improve the quality of the news we get in this country. Anyway, let's see what they say. SARS coronavirus 2 may have been artificially engineered by modifying an existing virus. Yeah, I think that's true. That would be my view. Concern potential for another pandemic reported from a Chinese laboratory, possibly caused by a different virus. So this is the concern. The concern is if it's happened once, it can happen again, and NZZ shares this concern. And they talk specifically about the MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome virus. And I agree this is a potential concern. Now, in 2020, according to NZZ report, China was working on SARS-like coronaviruses, but also on viruses similar to those producing Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. Now, why is this a concern? Well, there are cases of Middle East Respiratory Syndrome quite regularly. It sometimes occurs in Saudi Arabia, for example, from camels. But the point is, it doesn't spread to people it spreads from camels to people, but it doesn't spread from person to person. Now, if they were using gain-of-function research to increase the transmissibility of a MERS virus, that would be quite concerning. If you had a MERS virus which was very transmissible, because the MERS fatality rate is 20 to 40%, so it's got a very high case fatality rate. My lights has gone funny. There we go. Very high case fatality rate. So that would be a concern. So if you imagine a virus that was as transmissible as the SARS coronavirus 2 that we've just had the pandemic of, as transmissible as that, but with a 20, 30 or 40% fatality rate, work it out for yourself. It wouldn't bear thinking about. Fortunately, it was a SARS coronavirus 2 type that leaked and not a MERS type that leaked. The virus responsible for MERS circulates in bats in China, for instance, according to the news report. Now, they go on to discuss this report here, which, do I have it? Yes, I do. This journal report here. Now, I haven't gone through this in great detail in the journal, but it is reported in the NZZ German language report. So in discussing this report here, that we've just looked at, this science paper here that we've just looked at, researchers involved reached the conclusion that experiments in Wuhan had specifically adapted the MERS virus to humans. So that is a concern. Thankfully, it's not the one that leaked. Thankfully, it's not specifically adapted the MERS virus to humans. In other words, the report here is indicating that there was gain of function with a Middle East respiratory syndrome virus. If that had been more transmissible with its high fatality rate, 10-20%, we could have been talking about 500 million deaths. Or, I don't know, work it out for yourself. 10-20%, 30% death rate. It could have been really quite bad. But fortunately, it wasn't the one that leaked. This is Professor Christian Drosten. Now, he's a medical doctor. He's a professor of virology. And apparently, the report says he's the best-known virologist in Germany. So it sounds like a good guy, actually. The MERS virus is a clear candidate for a pandemic, which is why it's being studied. But this research should not involve making it more transmissible in the laboratory, according to Professor Drosten. So it shouldn't, but it does seem to have been. The analyses discussed by the scientists meeting at the Federal Intelligence Services, that's the German intelligence group, reveal a significant amount of manipulation that apparently extends as far as prestigious scientific journals. The scientific journals used to be the bedrock on which you stood. They were the closest thing that we had to truth. If you weren't sure about something, you'd check Gray's Anatomy, then you'd check the latest scientific journals. Now, we question them much more than we do. In fact, I'd go further. Many people no longer trust them as much as they did. And this is without even going into the area of commercial compromise. This is just political compromise that's being talked about. So, apparently extends as far as prestigious, or I'd say formally prestigious scientific journals. Chinese state propaganda was intended to manipulate what was published in scientific journals, and it succeeded. And we know about the Origin paper. We've looked at that loads of times, the famous Viral Origins paper that talked about conspiracy theories of lab leaks. That did incalculable harm, according to them. Right, Professor Drosten again. Scientific publications are subject to rigorous reviews of their quality and details. However, a deliberate, perhaps even politically motivated, I like this moderate language, perhaps even politically motivated deception is extremely difficult to control. WHO report, viral origins outside China possible. Now, the WHO report at the time did say that it's possible that the virus arose outside China and it came back to China and I think it was frozen fish. I mean, at the time, this appeared ludicrous. With the clear light of the retrospectoscope, it appears even more ludicrous. But viral origins outside China possible, according to the WHO report. And as we know, the United States has left the WHO partly because of disappointment in this. My country has not left the WHO, but the WHO report did say viral origins outside China was possible. A high-ranking researcher at the meeting by the Federal Intelligence Services. Now, we're not told who this is. So, and remember, this is from this report here, the NZZ reports about this. This is all in translated into English here, actually, very readable, well worth spending. It's about a 15-minute read, I suppose, 10-minute read, 15-minute read, but it's very good, very very well written. I think it's automatically translated. Then the translators actually spruce it up a bit, so it is a pretty good translation. Right, so this high-ranking official at the meeting of the Federal Intelligence Services, we never imagined such manipulation was possible, let alone it would succeed. One characteristic of the virus that produced COVID-19 is so-called furin cleavage site, a biological trait that enhances human-to-human transmission. So far, a cleavage site has not been found in any other closely related SARS coronavirus to like coronavirus that occurs in bats. So this furin cleavage site appears to have been, it's got the potential to be put in by this gain-of-function research. We also know that the virus had a single or a double origin. Again, with a natural virus, you'd expect it to pop up all over the place. We know our viral vectors, an animal vector has never been found. There's just so many lines of evidence that point to a laboratory origin for this virus. And that 80 to 90%, yeah, 80 to 90%, I would put that as a minimum. So I get, I must have had 10,000 questions. Is this a bioweapon? In my view, the answer is no, it's not. I think this is a mistake. I think the Chinese were absolutely mortified that this was leaked. In China, there's something called loss of face. People in Asia don't like to lose face. The laboratory leak caused loss of face because the laboratory was leaky. Imagine that, a leaky laboratory. That's a disgraceful thing, a great loss of face. So was this leak deliberate? No, I don't think it was. Was gain of function going, was lots of dangerous gains of function research going on? Yeah, I think that would be my conclusion. Were these labs leaky? Yeah, that would be my conclusion. Was biosecurity what it should have been? Obviously not. Could there be corruption involved? Yes, there could be corruption involved. Was data taken down from the web shortly after the leak was confirmed? Yeah, we know that happened as well. So many lines of evidence there. But bioweapon, was this the deliberate bioweapon? German intelligence services says there is nothing to suggest that SARS coronavirus 2 was specifically developed as a bioweapon. I think basically they were doing gain-of-function research, and we know the American connection, the US connection to this as well. I think they were doing that and it leaked. I think it's as simple as that. My reason for saying this is if the Chinese wanted to produce a bioweapon, they could produce a much more deadly one than leaked. I think, well, even if they manipulated MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, as a bioweapon, 20 to 40% fatality rate. I think it was 20 to 40%. Yeah, 20 to 40% fatality rate. That would have been a better weapon than SARS coronavirus 2. If the United States wanted to produce a bioweapon with a 90% fatality rate, I think it could. If the UK did, I think it could. If China wanted to, I think it could. So that's a sobering thought, that there could well be viral bioweapons in existence that are as transmissible as measles, more transmissible than SARS coronavirus 2, with a 90% fatality rate. This is an existential threat to humankind. That's why I keep going on about it. Biological leaks, warfare could kill 90% of us, ending civilization. Probably wouldn't kill all people. There'd be a few left who were resistant to it. There's always people that are resistant to diseases. But then who's going to maintain the nuclear power stations? They'd probably just go to pot. Who's going to maintain the nuclear bombs? You know, the Earth would probably become completely uninhabitable. apart from the complete breakdown in law and order and civilization that would occur, and all the disasters and the wars and the return to primitive states that will go on the 10% of the population that were left. It's an existential threat to civilization and humanity. That's why it's easy to say just stop all this gain of function research, but the trouble is, if there's bad guys out there, and there is, they'll be doing this research. So if we're the good guys, not so sure about the UK anymore, but hypothetically speaking, imagine we were the good guys, then we need to do it to keep up with the bad guys. So it's kind of an arms race, really, isn't it? Quite what you do about that, I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments. I'm not sure we've quite worked it out for nuclear weapons yet, have we? We haven't worked it out for nuclear weapons yet. So there's often enormous pressure on researchers to conduct spectacular research quickly and deliver sensational data, according to the German report. This is particularly true within China. Such an environment increases the likelihood of mistakes. So bioweapon, no, I really don't think so, because if the Chinese had wanted to produce a bioweapon, I think they could have produced a way, way better one than they did. So there we go. German intelligence, 80 to 90% was it? Likelihood of a lab leak in 2020. Didn't tell us, 80 to 90% in 2020. Didn't tell us until some brave investigative journalists found out last week. And if German intelligence knew, I suspect other intelligence knew. And then, is there any surprise there's been a loss of trust? Total loss of trust. I suppose the good thing about it is it's made me reevaluate many, many things. The age of deference, in my mind, is past. Let me know what you think. Thank you for watching.